Welcome. I'm Frank Conkling, and this is Panic Consulting's ArcGIS Pro workshop. And in this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to look at annotation. All right. And many of you who know me know that for the most part, I consider annotation mostly unnecessary when you're dealing with just pure editing of data. But I do recognize that from a cartographic standpoint, there's still a need for producing these maps that look good. And while you can do an awful lot with labeling, sometimes, especially for dimensional information, sometimes people prefer to have annotation pop up. It is a lot of work, but it is something that there's a lot of recognition on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the differences between ArcMap annotation and ArcGIS Pro annotation. And there's a couple things you need to know if you're going to go into ArcGIS Pro and start using annotation. And the first thing is that once you upgrade the structure, well, let's start with this. Sorry, let's go back and start with this, that in fact, you cannot edit ArcMap annotation inside ArcGIS Pro. You cannot do it. It prevents you from doing it. So you must go and take and update that annotation. You must upgrade that data set in order to do it. But the other thing, and this is more important, once you've done that, that annotation is no longer readable by ArcMap. So it's a very critical thing that you understand. When you upgrade it, it upgrades it in place. So you are taking your old annotation and forever making it so that ArcMap cannot read that. So let's go in and just sort of look at some of this here. So I have here a project, and this project has a couple of parcel fabrics in it. The first one is an ArcGIS Pro parcel fabric, and it does have some annotation on here. This actually is annotation in ArcGIS Pro. And then I also have another map here, another map tab here, and this is an ArcMap parcel fabric, and it's just loaded in here. And when I look at whether or not this is editable, it says, let me go and turn on my editing here, and it will tell me on all of these that in fact, the annotation must be upgraded to be editable. You cannot edit ArcMap annotation inside of ArcGIS Pro. You just can't do it. But once it has been upgraded, if we look, it is completely editable. There is no issue with it at all. So just be aware that, again, you must upgrade annotation in order for it to be editable inside of ArcGIS Pro. So the first question you have is, well, how do we do that? And let's go to geoprocessing here. And there is an upgrade data set. That upgrade data set, you go and it will ask for what are you trying to upgrade. In this case, I will just go and click on this old annotation here and say, okay, it will go and upgrade it. It will also give me an error here or a warning here that says this annotation that you're looking to upgrade, it's actually going to do it in place, meaning it's not going to create a copy of it. It's going to do it on this actual feature class. And then once you do that, you can't go backwards. We've tried. There's no way to go backwards. There's no way to even go and export it from or downgrade it from ArcGIS Pro Anno to ArcMap Anno. You can't do it. So just be aware. If you're going to go and do this, copy your dimensions first. Copy your annotation feature class first before you go and do that. Matter of fact, if you'll note, when I go in here, I actually have two, because I actually did go and take and copy my dimension feature class and then upgrade that, because I want to show you some of what happens on there. All right, so this is the first thing we want to look at is you can read ArcMap annotation inside of ArcGIS Pro. You can look at it, you can see it. You cannot edit it. You must go and upgrade the data set to edit. However, once you do upgrade it, you can no longer read it in ArcMap. So just be aware that's sort of a cutoff point. You want to be careful with what you do with that, and just be aware of that. All right. So let's go in here and look and see, what about structural differences between these two? Well, I'm going to go to this and pull up the attribute fields for, this is for my ArcMap annotation feature class. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do the same thing over here and pull up the actual fields to see on here. All right, so this is ArcMap and this is ArcGIS Pro on here. And if I'm going down through them, and this is completely default out of the geodatabase. When I look through them, there's a couple change. For example, in ArcGIS Pro, the shape field is up near the top. So I can actually go and move that down to where it is on the other. And then we can start comparing one to the other. And it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of differences between the two. It looks like the attribute fields are the same until we get to here. If we look, the bold and italic attribute fields no longer exist in the ArcGIS Pro annotation feature class. And the reason for that is if you look all the way down here on the bottom of this, there is this new attribute field called font style. So they've combined those style that were separate feature classes, they've combined them and put them into one single attribute on here. Just sort of to let you know, when I'm looking through this, that looks like that may be the only major difference in here. Let's go up to font name here, font name here. Size is the same, underline, vertical alignment, horizontal, offsets, angles, word spacing, character width, flip angle, overrides. That seems to be the only difference, is that they've taken these two on here. That's the only difference that you can see right now. Internally and structurally, there may be big differences between these two, but on the surface, it looks like the biggest difference is that they took the styling attribute fields and combined them into one for the ArcGIS Pro annotation, which is, again, is kind of interesting, but it's a shame that that would prevent it, if that is the only thing that's preventing it from being readable inside of ArcGIS or ArcMap on here. All right, so those are structural differences. There's minor structural differences in here, but there are structural differences. Well, what about editing? So I'm over in my ArcGIS Parcel fabric, and I can start editing here. You'll note, by the way, that I'm using the enable and disable editing function inside of ArcGIS Pro 2.6 and above. If you purely do editing, it might not be worth it to have that. But for me, I do a lot of things besides editing. I change structural, I do compactions on file geodatabases, I do a lot of structural changes. And if I don't have that enable and disable option available to me, it actually locks me out sometimes. So I have that so I can both start editing or stop editing with this one button. This button, by the way, is also available on the edit tab on here. Let me just go and show you while we're here. If I go to editing and then I look here, and it's here, enable under session, enable and disable editing from the edit tab. If you have it checked, you have that button. If you have it unchecked, it automatically is editing as soon as you open up your project. All right, so let's start editing on here. So by the way, this workshop is not going to be an extensive everything about going and editing a piece of annotation inside of ArcGIS Pro. If we have enough demand for it, we may do that in the future. Right now, I wanted to just talk on a sort of a macro level. What's the differences? What do you want to look out for? Because editing in Pro of annotation is pretty much the same as it was in 10.x on ArcMap. So on here, I can go in here, I can select a piece of annotation and say that's the annotation I want to go in and work on, go to my attributes, and I have, for example, here's the actual text of annotation. Here is all of the attributes for this annotation on here. You can see here, this is 34.13, the font, the size, everything else in here. If I wanted to go and change this, I could go in and change this to 34.15. It automatically goes and changes that on here. So again, in a lot of ways, it looks just like ArcMap annotation looked. If I wanted to go and create annotation on here, I could go in here and click on my annotation, have a piece of text, input the text, and this shows me what type of annotation or how I'm going to structurally secure that annotation. Here is my horizontal annotation around a point. Here's along a line. Here is curved annotation. Here's follow feature. And here is a header. So I can go and do this and click on a header here. And there's my annotation with a piece of here. This is a standard horizontal. This is going and doing it so that it's parallel to a line here. And then this is along a curve. And finish that out. So those are the different ways in which you would automatically go and add pieces of annotation to your project data on here. Again, it works very similar to the way ArcMap works. There's not a whole lot of differences in here. But I did want to go in and clarify and go through some of this in here. Let me go through this one final one here. This is where it's actually going and doing a follow along, and you'll see where it's actually following along. When I did that insertion point, go in here and let's do another one. Let's go back over here. And I did an insertion point and it went and selected the polygon. And now it will go and be following along with the offset that's set on my annotation for here. So that's the follow on here. That's this option here with that value. Let me go to the properties of here and look at the properties. And this tells me things such as the visibility, when and where it's visible. And then here is my annotation class. And this is parcel dimensions is what I'm looking at. It tells me whether or not I have a SQL query in here. And then what is my expression to go and create this piece of annotation. This is actually feature linked annotation that I've got here. So what is the expression to go and do that rather than just simple annotation on here? We're going to explore a little bit more how to do feature linked annotation and what it actually means and how it works on here. Let me go back here and go to the ArcMap parcel fabric and see if these, and you'll note there is a difference here, is that, again, these have the same visibility range on here, but in this case of the ArcMap, there actually was a SQL query. And the SQL query has to do with inside the parcel fabric, the old ArcMap parcel fabric, you had historic categories. And then you also had linear categories, what type of a line this was. And this meant that, in fact, this is a current line. It's not historic in any way. And that for categories, it was either road frontage or it was a boundary line in here. That's what this SQL query is right here on here. And then if you look at the expression, you'll actually see there's also a difference in the expression. This expression is written in Visual Basic on here. The ArcMap, the ArcGIS Pro is actually written in Arcade. It's an Arcade expression on here that we're looking at. And we're going to explore that a little bit more as we go. So for dimensions, we want to be aware that there's also a difference between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro as far as how it stores COGO and how it calculates things on there. With ArcGIS Pro, when we look at a line feature class, and again, I'm assuming that we're going to make these dimensions, all of these COGO values are double word numbers. These are numbers. They are not pieces of text. So you want to be aware of that. Same way if you're going to do any sort of thing from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. Most of the older non-parcel fabric ArcMap COGO fields were string values or text values. So you have to make sure you convert those as you go forward. All right, so let's go through this a little bit more. Let's look over here. Let's go to properties. And again, with properties, we can only look at it here. Let's actually go in here and this is the original ArcMap, and it's from an earlier release. I have to go and upgrade it to actually do anything on it. And that's what this actually is. I've gone and I've upgraded this so I can actually get in here and edit and dig into this a little bit more. So this annotation class, I can tell whether or not it's updated when a related feature shape is modified, because this is feature linked, what my label engine is, what my reference scale is, what orientation I have for vertical labels and such. In this case, this is parcel dimensions 3. I can go in here and edit this. So this is the properties editor for annotation. It allows me to go and say, okay, what is the font that I'm using? What's the size I'm using? The colors. And if you're familiar with ArcGIS Pro, this is how it actually goes and allows you to do labeling and editing. It gives you this format of the text dialog pane. There's also this annotation class where I can get in here and set things such as the actual expression that's used to go and create that piece of text in a feature linked annotation. So on here, you can see that this actually is a VB script expression that's being used on this. And it goes through here and there's all sorts of settings for the ArcMap parcel fabric. These should not be used for the ArcGIS Pro because there's a lot of things that just are completely different in the ArcGIS parcel fabric. The way it stores curves, the way it goes and modifies curves and looks at them are completely different. You want to use the Arcade expression that's available, and I'll eventually go and do that. All right, let's get out of here then and go back to here. So again, the key things on here is you want to make sure that with your annotation, what structure is it using? Is it using ArcMap structure or is it using ArcGIS Pro? And it will tell you whether or not you can edit it if it's the older structure, it will give you a warning as soon as you attempt to go and make it editable. Under the table of contents, it will say, no, you can't do that, but you do have to go and upgrade it. Upgrading it again is something as simple as going and using the upgrade data set, but just be aware that it modifies it in place, and it will take a while to go and upgrade, but once it's upgraded, it will be available for you to actually go and edit. So let me go in here, just bring this in and add this to my current map. This is my old here. Let's turn it on. This is the attribution, the annotation that has been upgraded from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro. So if I go to my create here, I can go in here. And then I can go in and just set this on however I wish to go and do this. All right, on here. So upgrade it, you then can go and get and edit it. By the way, if we look at some of the other options in here, and just to make sure you understand, in any of these edit functions inside ArcGIS Pro, if there are additional options on here, you can go and click this right arrow, and it will allow you to go and look at some of these things that you can do. For example, whether or not this is centered, left justified, right justified, or full. All of these in here, you can upgrade these and change them at any one time. So if, for example, I wanted to put a piece of text in here that's 10 point, I could then go and do that, and it will automatically change that for that one point in there. If I go back here and do this again, it will keep it as that upgrade. So let's go back here and let's see again. This is now set to 10. All right, so you still have some ability to go and modify these once they're in here, even though you might have a feature class set for them, but it modifies the template as far as what's going to be used for it. All right, do we have any questions yet, or anything you'd like to see on here? I'm going to start getting a little bit deeper here, so please.
Amy has a question in the chat.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Can annotation be published to ArcGIS Online? As with most things, it's not a simple yes or no. Well, I can start here. If you're trying to publish just pure annotation to ArcGIS Online, it's my understanding I don't think you can. However, what you can do is you could publish, for example, vector tiles that have annotation on them. You could publish raster tiles. I'd be very careful with raster tiles because raster tiles for non-aerials are going to be going away. Esri has already announced that raster tiles are being deprecated and they're not going to produce them anymore. They're modifying all their base maps to vector tiles with the exception of anything that's got an aerial or raster base in it. So you could always go to a vector tile and do it that way. I believe that you can also go and publish annotation from your own premises, hosted premises, but you cannot do it from ArcGIS Online. So, and again, it's a little bit complex in that there's a lot of ways to reference AGOL. Is it AGOL, ArcGIS Online that's hosted, which is Esri going and hosting it for you, or which has less options on it, or is it in a premises? Is Esri planning on that in the future AGOL upgrade? Good question. Unfortunately, I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know. It would be nice. I know that Esri is planning on continuing to put more and more functionality in there. And they're continuing to put more things in ArcGIS Online. It would be a great suggestion to go and put up on the ArcGIS Online community on there. Can you still set anno from a set scale? Example, owner name. Can you still set anno from a set scale? So in fact, let me go in here and just make sure that we understand here on the properties. In here, this does have a reference scale. So everything that I'm setting is relative to that reference scale. So when I say 10 points, I mean 10 points at 1 to 1200. Is that what you're setting as far as set scale? Jeff, not quite sure. So I see there's a bunch of chats going on here. So yes, Jeff, it does utilize a reference scale on here. That reference scale is used for any of your annotation. Annotation must have a reference scale on it, which is another one of the downsides to Anno, in that if you're going to be producing maps at multiple scales, you can go and get labels to go and adjust, but you cannot get Anno to adjust. Anno is at any one single set scale. So if you're going to create a map at multiple scales, say 1 to 1200 or 1 to 600 or 1 to 400, you have to create Anno feature classes for each of those, Anno classes for each of those, not Anno feature classes. So you're going to have multiple copies of Anno, each of them placed for those individual reference scales. Again, one of the reasons I'm not crazy about Anno. I see Mark just said he'd recommend using vector tiles instead of feature layers in ArcGIS Online. If I have this correct, it's 200 times cheaper. I would only use pure features for data that needs to be edited or changed often. Mark has got a great point here as it relates to going and putting features up on ArcGIS Online, because on ArcGIS Online, we are actually charged, the credits that we use are for storage. Vector tiles use up, I don't know whether it's 1/200th of it, Mark, but I do know that it's greatly reduced from feature storage. So vector tiles are much smaller than features are as far as the storage capability, but you cannot edit vector tiles up there. Whereas if you have to edit something, you would put a feature service up there and edit that feature service while you're doing. So it's a great point, though, that if you're looking at creating this cartographic element, perhaps instead of having lines up there or polygons up there served out as feature services, instead you use vector tiles, create your vector tiles, publish those vector tiles up there, and use that because that's going to use up less space than actual feature services will up there. Good point, Mark. 1.2 credits per gigabyte versus 2.4 credits per 10 megabyte. I guess it is 200 times. So thank you, Mark, on there. All right. Let's look a little bit more at feature linking services. Feature linking the annotation to the lines so that when you create, for example, let me go in here, I'm editing. Let's go in to create and let's go to tax lines. Let's go in here and create a tax line. and give it a bearing and a distance, north 45 degrees. And let's make it 150 feet on here. And if you note it, it automatically went and created the annotation for me. All right. And that's called feature linking the annotation. So inside that annotation, I have it set up so that as I create or modify a line, to automatically go and create a piece of annotation with that. And if I go in here and attribute this line and change it from 150 feet to 120 feet, you'll note it automatically changes that annotation for me. So what it's actually doing is it's watching as I create a line or as I modify a line, and automatically creating and / modifying that piece of annotation as I make modifications to the feature that it's linked to. How does that work? Well, in here, there actually is it's called a relationship class. And if I look at the properties of this relationship class, what it will tell me is that it's relating. In this case, this is the name that was generated when it first created. And it's a composite feature class. And this is one-to-many, meaning I can create one line and have multiple anno coming off of it. And it's modifying it from my line to my annotation so that it's sending in a message. When I change this shape or when I create a shape, automatically go and take an attribute out of here, out of this line feature class, using this primary key and sending it to this destination class here on here. So, and then it also has the split and combine. I'm actually noticed that's actually the wrong one. This is the one I should be at. Yeah, here's the test on here. So feature linked annotation allows it to go and automatically link it up. And as you create a line on here, it automatically will create a piece of annotation and modify a piece of annotation for you. So again, annotation for the most part gets used mostly for dimensioning along property lines. You can also use it for things like putting up a piece of text on there. But again, from our standpoint, labels are a much better solution for that. But it's purely this cartographic stuff. How do you go and manage that? And the reason why it's done is because you can now do things like you can take this and you can move it. So you can modify it and put it up here and tell where you want that piece of text to be on here. So you can specifically tell it exactly where that text is supposed to go. Interestingly, when you go in here and do that, if I'm on here, I'm on move. I don't want to go on move. I go in here. This is actually the piece of text that's in here. Go in here and do that. If I select this line, not that line, not move. If I select just this one line and unselect this, I want to get off of. All right, so if I go in here and I go to attributes and look at this, what happens when I modify anything on here to go from 120 or 130 back to here it will modify that text, but it has not modified that location along that text. That's one of the things that you can set as you're going in here and creating this. I'm in the wrong one. That's what happens when you're got this here. Here's my parcel dimensions. Here it is here. When the feature shape is modified in here, the annotation is created here. So it's when I modify the shape, not when I modify the attributes of it, but when I modify the shape. If I go here and edit the vertex of there, and let's get out here. All right, let's go in here and modify this shape. I must have something else in here selected. When I modify the shape in here, it will reset the location. So, and I know we just dug very deep there for a minute. Modifying the attribute does not change the location of it. Modifying the shape will reset the location on here. It will attempt to recreate it every time I go and create a piece of line, and it will reset the location together with the piece of attribution every time I change the shape of that line on here. All right. Again, Jeff, thanks for pointing out some of the problems are, if you want multiple scales in here, if you want to create maps of multiple scales, you have to have multiple copies of anno classes, and it's just a lot of work on here. Let's look at this here. Come on, where are we here? Here is the tax line 2 dimensions relationship class. And this is a composite one-to-many. It's forward lines object ID to the feature ID. And going on here and whether or not there's a split. You must create that, you must modify that in order to go and have this set up. One more thing I want to look at is I actually am going to take this and add this to my current map. Turn those old ones off. And turn them off. There's the new one there. This is still the Visual Basic on here. And this is actually referencing, if I look in here, this is actually referencing, which one is, no, this is a copy. This one was actually referencing the old, this was referencing the lines out of here. So it's not going to create new annotation for me unless I do it explicitly without having any feature linking. So let's create a new feature class on here. All right. Let's go in here and let's turn on labels. Turn on labels here for my tax parcels. All right. And this is for my full pin. Let's see, no values on here. This is my full pin that's getting created on here. This is actually going and using, let's look at these label properties. It's actually using the name of this parcel on here. And it's creating right now a label for that. I can use this to go and create annotation on here by the way, this is in ArcGIS Pro 2.8. It gives you the ability to go and search any command inside of ArcGIS Pro, both an editing command, a geoprocessing command, any sort of command you can go and search right here. You can see the Alt Q, and it'll allow you to go and pull up tools, commands, and help on it without actually knowing, going anywhere. So let's change this. So this is a 1200 scale. And let's change this scale to 1200. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the map inside of ArcGIS Pro, and it's going to convert just a single layer in the map. It's going to convert the tax parcel polygons on here. And this is going to go and tell us the workspace that it's going to be stored in. Let's go ahead and store it in here. And we're going to call it tax parcel anno. We can tell it to go and create them for all tax parcel lines, convert unplaced labels, create feature link labels, and limitation, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. And what group do I want to do it? Create feature link anno. And let's run this and see. So this is actually creating a new annotation feature class for all of the labels. And of course it didn't. Tables being edited. Thank you. Save my edits. Go ahead and rerun this. So it's taking all of my labels and creating feature linked annotation on them on here. So it uses the standard labeling routine that I have set up for that to go and generate these labels, including things like generating unplaced labels. If there's labels that don't fit, for example, maybe there's a label that doesn't fit in this polygon here, it will go and create that annotation for that also. All right, any more? It looks like our chat window has slowed down for a while here. Is there anything else in here? Any other questions on here while we're running this?
Nothing right now.
Thank you. So again, I jumped around here today because I didn't want this specifically to be, this is how you do annotation one by one by one by one, but rather I'm making the assumption you kind of know how to do anno, whether it be in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. And this sort of the differences between the anno in Pro versus the anno in ArcMap, and how to use them and some of the more nuances, some of the little idiosyncrasies of it as we're going. This is also live, by the way, so you can see that it's taking time on here. While we're doing that, let's see, is there anything else that we can be doing to show you? I can't start editing because it'll prevent that from running. So by the way, while we're waiting on this, let's talk about upcoming workshops. In 2 weeks, we have an ArcGIS Parcel Fabric workshop in which we're going to have Kendall County, Illinois, go and give us a presentation and talk about some of the things that they've been doing. Kendall County was one of the early adopters of the Parcel Fabric. Josh at Kendall County is really knowledgeable. And if you actually go out to the GeoNet and communities on there, you'll see him posting a lot. Josh is going to give us a presentation. He's done some pretty interesting things like record names, things like history, tracking history. And he's constantly pushing the envelope, trying to find new and better ways to go and utilize some of the tools that are available inside of ArcGIS Pro. And then the week after that, the fourth Thursday in June, we're going to have an Ask the Panda workshop in which there's no single focus. It's just going to be any questions that you have. If you have any questions and you want to talk, go ahead, log on that day, and we'll take questions from the audience, and we'll on the fly try to answer your questions, do demos, those sorts of things. So if there's anything specific you want us to see, if it's a fairly complex thing, please send us something in advance so I can at least have some data set ready for you on that. But otherwise, please come loaded with questions, because we're going to open it up and see if we can help you with it on there. This is actually taking a long time. And again, this is every tax parcel inside of here. I probably should have just done this individual extent here. I'm going to cancel this out. Sorry. Because I did the entire tax parcel on there. But it would have created a new feature class, a new anno class with just the tax parcels in there for it. All right. So let's look a little bit further and go in here and go to that test and go to the annotation feature class properties and show you some of the things that we have to do when we're going and migrating feature linked annotation, especially dimensional feature linked annotation, and moving it into ArcGIS Pro. All right. So the question that we have, thank you, Chris. How many people do you think have a geometric network, electric, and find a trace network to be very limited? And here that utility network is very involved. While we are not network specialists, there is a lot of similarity between the network maintenance solution and the parcel fabric as far as the way it's implemented. All I can say is that I would say that anyone that gets involved in a utility maintenance solution should recognize that it is very complex. You are building up your entire system. It is not a direct correlation between the ArcMap network solution and ArcGIS Pro network solution. There's not a direct one-to-one. I strongly recommend you find a consulting firm who's going to help you. I can tell you right now, we are strategic partners with GIS Inc., and they've done a lot of presentations. They do a lot of work with the network solution. I would recommend you go out and reach out to them and see if you can start getting some help from them. They are very, very knowledgeable, and they should be able to help you. Unfortunately, again, we don't have that domain knowledge on how to go and do that. So I'm not going to be able to help you on that. Sorry. Yeah, I understand there is a slowdown with the trace network. I do know that I recall them doing some work in 2.8 while I was in the alpha and beta testing. I saw some work they were doing on there. I don't know whether it got into full release though. but I know they were doing some work on it. I do have some friends that actually work on the development on the network solution, but again, I don't have that domain knowledge, so I can't tell you specifically on there. All right, okay. So we were talking about what we have to do to go and modify the ArcMap. Let me go back here and start editing again. Let's stop this here. This may be a residual of what I was doing here. It's locked all this stuff right now. Yep, okay. Let's cancel this redraw. Obviously, you can tell this is an unscripted demo here. I should have probably not started that before. Let's go back in here though, and there's certain things that we can do. So let's go in here.
Frank, there's a question in the chat. How do I know you're on the ArcMap and not the Pro? So how do I know you're on ArcMap and not Pro?
Okay, so up here on my two map tabs, this is the ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric. This is the ArcMap Parcel Fabric pulled in here. This is all Pro that I'm in. I don't have ArcMap open. As a matter of fact, I don't even have it installed on this machine. Now, when we're talking about the two dimensions, the two annotation feature classes that we had in here, let's see about removing this. This is, and I'm sorry, it can get confusing. So right now I'm working and it's still recovering from my geoprocessing on this. Let's go to history and let's cancel this, and it's still canceling that on here. It is still canceling that one. So inside of catalog here, I actually have two feature data sets. This Pro Parcel Editing feature data set contains the ArcGIS Pro information. And this is all restructured into the Pro Parcel Fabric, and you'll see it with an icon that has a blue icon here. This Parcel Editing feature data set actually contains the old ArcMap Parcel Fabric, and you'll see the different icon. This is the ArcMap Parcel Fabric icon. This is the ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric icon. Inside of here, this was the ArcMap annotation that I copied. And before the workshop, I actually went and also upgraded it. This is the ArcGIS Pro Dimensions annotation feature class. This has been upgraded. Matter of fact, I think if I go to properties, it may be able to tell me. No, it can't. It doesn't. But when I go and bring it into a map document, that's when it will go and tell me whether or not it has been updated. So if I bring this into this ArcMap one and I go to edit it, it will tell me I can actually edit these, but I cannot edit this because this is still the ArcMap annotation feature classes. Sorry, it is a little confusing. And again, I tend to be able to switch back and forth, but sorry. So when I go in here, you asked a question, did you label it that way or did Pro label it that way when you loaded it? I actually created two map tabs here. One that I went and created, and let's go and do that. Let's sort of, for those of you that aren't familiar with ArcGIS Pro and how tabs work. So if I go in here and I take this as my ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric, if I go in here and right click on it, I can say add this to a new map, and it will create a new map tab for me. And it's actually going to go and load up the parcel fabric structured so that I could actually edit it. The parcel fabric automatically goes and updates it like that. And sorry, I've got a lot of things going on here right now. By the way, while we're waiting for that to go and do that, one of the things you'll notice is that this is my catalog pane here. Under the catalog pane, I have, these are the folders that are included inside of my project. This is the database that's in my project. This is my default database. You can see it here. Whether or not I have any toolboxes, and I always have a default toolbox, but more importantly, here's the maps. You can see how many times I've opened map documents and then deleted them. If I go into my project and look at this, I could actually go in here. This one's called map number 9. This is map number 9. I can go in here and go over here and say, okay, this is a workshop map. All right, it will change the name here. It will change the name here, and it will change the name here. So by default, it just goes and puts it into map. When you create a new map tab on here, I'm cleaning this all up. You can see how much I play around and I destroy my projects, but just, randomly and adding map tabs however I want. And when I close out a map tab, that does not delete the map tab, that only closes it out. Let me go and take this one off too. All right, so there's my 3 tabs that I have in my current map project, or excuse me, my current projects. And let's go and save that. So again, I have 3 different tabs. Let me go and show you another little trick. Notice when I added this tab, it went to full extent, and there's an extent problem with this data. So let me zoom back to where I was, and I can actually go to my view tab and tell it to take all of the map tabs here and center and scale them so they are consistent. When I go across them, here's my ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric. Here's my ArcMap Parcel Fabric. Here's the one that I just loaded. It will have the same scale and centered across them. So as I add new maps there, I want to make sure that I go back to my original one and relink them all so that they're all going to be centered on there the same. All right, does that help? So I labeled it. Sorry if that's, all right. So we have, it looks like this is done now. So we can get in here. So Jeff, you're delaying the ArcMap editing for a playbook because of that lack of confidence that once we change to Pro Anno, it means we are editing all Platbook features in Anno. Yeah, it's a decision that we all have to do. Esri is making it, the longer we wait, the easier Esri makes it for us, because Esri has now said no more updates to ArcMap. That's it. You'll note that, in fact, ArcGIS Enterprise is now at 10.9, but there was no update to ArcMap. There is no ArcMap 10.9. 10.8.1 was the last one that was released. The only thing you'll get now is you'll get dot releases, point releases for possible bug fix. That's it. ArcMap is gone. It's dead now. They'll support it for another 5 years or so, but it's not in development anymore. It's just archived and not available. I understand. I understand. Rest in peace, definitely. All right. So what I was going to show you was this is the old Dimension Anno. This is the one that I upgraded on. And I want to go and show you how you can actually go in here and update the annotation so that you can update it from, you can update it from Visual Basic into Arcade. So this is the parcel dimensions test. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to stop editing. And I'm going to go to annotation feature classes. And this is my feature class. When I click on this, it will bring up my properties on here. Sorry. My anno class, sorry. I was over here. I need to go to the anno class. I need to update. This is my Visual Basic expression. What I want to do is I'm going to take that Visual Basic expression and delete it completely. All right. In this case, I'm going to go over to my tax lines. And I have in here, this is the, yeah, I know. This is the Arcade script to go and this is the Arcade script that's going to be used here. Again, this is Visual Basic. I'm going to change it to Arcade. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to copy and paste my Arcade script in here. Let's go and open this up and actually look at this Arcade script. This Arcade script actually goes and is broken down into areas. And once you understand what these areas do, it's a little bit easier to go and figure out what you want to do with this. So the first one is it's setting a bunch of variables up here. Things like what's the quadrant bearing format, whether or not the distance or the direction is going to be shown, what about the radius and what curve parameters. These are all sort of flags that are being set here. What text actually appears before a curve component of it, whether there's rounding, what's the rounding you want on it, what format for the numbers. These, by the way, are all Arcade expressions on here. What is the font size? And this is critical if you're going to attempt to use a script like this to go and replicate what your old your VB script did. In this case, the default font size is set to 10, but our annotation wants it to be 6. So I'm going to change it to 6 there. And then it's going to go down through and say, okay, here is the variable for the direction, and it uses the direction field, the distance field, the radius field. So it's setting the variables for what values it's pulling out. The next thing is you've got is a function where it's going to go and calculate what the azimuths are. Then it's going to go and there's another function which goes and takes those azimuths and converts them into degrees, minutes, and seconds to go and it returns the DMS. Another one is a function to go and check and see whether or not the COGO values are properly attributed. Then whether or not that COGO is valid on here. So here it's putting together and assembling the direction string if you're telling it to show the bearing or the direction. If it's here, then go and do this. And here's the color is set to the direction color. The font name and size is set to that. Here's where the whole thing, right? And here's the distance. It's setting up the distance string. It's called distance string. And it's the color, the font, and the text is actually now it's rounding the distance field by the unit distancing variable to the number format. And then it's closing off the font and the color string on here. That's really the one I wanted to show you. Then it's setting up all the curve parameters on here, and then it's assembling this. And on here, what we're doing is we're saying, if it's not a curve, just return that string. just return that distance string. If it's a curve, return the radius string together with the curve string on here. That's really what this arcade script is doing. It's not, once you learn a little bit arcade, it's not that difficult to follow, but it's a good lesson to go and look at this and see what arcade is actually doing and what it's capable of doing on here. I'm not going to save any of this on here. So what I've done is I've told it to go and use this expression in here to go and put it on here. I am going to change where it's set the size here. I'm going to change this to 6 points instead of 10 points. And then everything else I'm going to leave the same. All right, so I'm going to go and say, okay, that's good. Field not found, direction field's not found on here. Oh, it's still pointing at the old line on here. So you have to go and reset your relationship class on here. There's a relationship class in here that tells it what it's pointing to. In this case, it's pointing to the parcel fabric lines instead of to the tax lines. So I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to reset this, but I'm going to stop here and say, this is more advanced. If you want, you can reach out to me and I'll actually show you one-on-one how to do this, or we can do this during the Ask a Panda on here. But are there any other questions on annotation? Again, this was primarily not an editing of annotation, but structural and implementation and things you have to think about as you're looking at Anno. If you're looking for a specific annotation editing class, let us know and we'll go and we'll actually do a workshop specifically on that. Any questions? All right, if not, thank you all. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277 and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.